At the North Service Gate, the access light glowed green without a logged request. I stopped, hand still on the barrier control. The gate was never opened before dawn. A child's knitted glove lay beneath the hinge, damp from frost. I waited for the alert that didn't come. The radio stayed clean. Procedure said reset and move on. Instinct said the silence was manufactured. The North Service Gate should not have been active. The guard noticed it before he reached it, the way the access light cast a soft green reflection against frost-dulled stone. At this hour, before dawn, before staff rotation, before the palace fully woke, the gate remained sealed unless a logged request preceded it. That was how the system prevented exactly this kind of ambiguity. He stopped with his hand still hovering near the barrier control. The gate was open just enough to allow passage, not wide, not careless, deliberate. He checked the time, 05:11. Cold settled into his gloves, a steady seep through layered fabric. The air smelled metallic, sharp, the kind that carried sound farther than it should. He listened before moving closer. Nothing. No footsteps, no voices, no mechanical fault alarm echoing through the internal channel. He accessed the gate log on his wrist terminal. The screen populated cleanly, too cleanly. An open cycle at 05:06. Override authorization accepted. No request origin, no destination code, no escort tag. Overrides existed for emergencies. They were never silent. His eyes dropped to the ground near the hinge. Frost lay thin and granular, disturbed only in one place. A child's knitted glove rested against the stone, damp and darkened where it had soaked through. The fibers were stiff with cold. The size was unmistakable. He did not touch it. Instead, he scanned the surrounding area. The path curved inward, bordered by hedges trimmed to ceremonial precision. Beyond that bend, camera coverage thinned by design, sacrificed for aesthetics during state arrivals. He knew every blind spot. This one had been used. The radio remained quiet at his shoulder. No inquiry, no automated query from Central Security asking why a gate had cycled outside routine hours. The system believed the movement was legitimate. That troubled him more than the open gate. He keyed his recorder. His voice remained neutral, measured. North Service Gate active without logged request. Override present. No alarm triggered. Delaying reset pending verification. He ended the entry and waited, as protocol demanded. Nothing came. The silence was not passive. It was maintained. He stepped closer to the gate and placed his palm lightly against the barrier. The motor resisted, not physically, but electronically. The system held position, awaiting completion of a command already given elsewhere. Someone had told it to stay open. He withdrew his hand and looked again at the glove. The frost around it bore faint impressions, small, uneven footprints leading inward. They did not lead back out. He made a decision. Leaving the gate unsealed created a vulnerability. It also preserved evidence. Closing it would correct the system and erase the question of why it had been wrong in the first place. He stepped through the gate. The temperature dropped immediately beyond it, the wind cutting sharper along the path. His boots crunched softly against frost-hardened stone. He moved at a controlled pace, scanning corners, listening to the way sound traveled differently in open air. 10 meters in, he heard something that did not belong. A sharp intake of breath, controlled, followed by a single word, forced out as if permission had been denied. "Stop, please." The sound came from beyond the hedge line, where the path narrowed and visibility broke. It was brief, cut off quickly, as though corrected. The guard did not call out. He did not run. He adjusted his stance and moved forward with purpose, steps lengthening, posture tightening. His hand lifted slightly, not to his weapon, but ready to intercede. As he rounded the bend, the scene resolved itself at once. A child stood near the inner access door, small frame rigid against the cold. A taller figure loomed close, one hand gripping the child's forearm just above the wrist. Not violent, controlled, the kind of restraint meant to compel without witnesses. The child's free hand was bare. The guard stopped just outside arm's reach and spoke, voice calm, even. "Release." The word carried authority without volume. The figure turned, the grip did not loosen. "This is an authorized movement. You're out of position." The guard stepped one step closer. The distance closed deliberately. "There's no logged request." "I authorized it." "Then log it now." The pause was brief, but it existed. Behind him, the gate remained open. The green light still glowed. The child spoke again, quieter this time, voice tight with effort. "Please." The guard shifted his weight forward and reached out. The guard's hand closed around the adult's wrist with precise pressure, just enough to interrupt the grip without escalating it. Training took over. Control points, leverage, minimal force. The hold broke. The child stepped back immediately, moving behind the guard without being told, small hands gripping the back of his coat. The adult exhaled sharply, more affronted than startled. "You don't understand the situation," the figure said, straightening the sleeve that had been disturbed. The voice was calm again, practiced. "This child was being corrected." The guard shifted half a step, placing his body fully between them. The cold bit through his uniform now that he was still. He could feel the child's presence close behind him, rigid, silent. "Step back," he said. The adult did not comply at once. Their gaze moved past him, toward the open gate, then returned. Calculation passed quickly across their face. "You are exceeding your authority." The guard did not answer that. He reached up and keyed his radio instead. "North Gate, minor located. Protective intervention initiated." The response came faster than before. "Confirm identity of supervising party." The adult answered before the guard could. "This is internal. Stand down." The guard cut the channel and turned his head slightly, enough to address the child without fully looking away. "Stay behind me," he said. The child did not move. Footsteps sounded from the service path behind them, another guard approaching, then slowing as the scene became clear. The palace was waking now, its systems beginning to notice the friction. The adult took a step back at last, hands raised slightly in a gesture meant to appear conciliatory. "This is unnecessary. The child will be returned. No report is required." The guard did not move aside. "I'm escorting the child. You can follow protocol if you wish." The adult's mouth tightened. "You will answer for this." "Yes," the guard said. He guided the child away from the access door, turning deliberately so his back never faced the adult. Each step was measured. He did not rush. Rushing would signal fear. They passed through the open gate together. The frost outside had begun to soften as the first light crept over the stonework. The green access light still glowed, unchanged, indifferent to the human calculus unfolding beneath it. Once inside the inner corridor, the guard sealed the door manually. The mechanism engaged with a muted thud that echoed faintly down the passage. He keyed the lock to secondary hold and turned only then to look at the child. Up close, the signs were clearer. The wrist already showed the beginnings of discoloration. The child's breathing was shallow, controlled, as if they had practiced not being noticed. "You're safe here," he said. He kept his voice low, even. The child nodded once. No tears, no questions. He removed his outer gloves and set them on a nearby bench. The child watched the movement closely, then reached out and took one, pulling it into their sleeve. The guard activated his recorder again. Protective custody established, minor unharmed, evidence of physical restraint observed, awaiting further instruction. He ended the recording and remained standing, positioning himself between the child and the corridor. Outside, voices carried faintly now, authority gathering itself, explanations being prepared. He knew what would come next. Orders would follow, written ones, clean language, appeals to reputation, hierarchy, discretion. He would be told to reset the gate, to return the child, to forget the glove beneath the hinge and the silence that had preceded it. He did not know yet how far this would go, only that the moment for easy compliance had passed. The gate remained closed. The child stayed behind him, and somewhere above, the palace systems adjusted, quietly recording the first deviation in a chain that would not easily be undone. The corridor warmed gradually as they moved deeper into the palace. Heat rose from the stone, uneven and old, the kind that never quite reached the extremities. The guard adjusted his pace to match the child's shorter steps. He did not take their hand. He stayed close enough that his presence blocked the corridor behind them without touching. They passed through a service junction where the light shifted from dawn blue to a steady amber. The change made the child squint briefly, then lower their head. The guard noticed how their shoulders remained drawn inward, as if expecting correction for occupying space. He chose a room deliberately. Not an office, not a guard post, a small archival holding room used for temporary storage during inventory rotations. No insignia, no portraits. One bench fixed to the wall, one table scarred by years of careful use. One camera in the corner, its lens capped for privacy compliance when the room was occupied. He sealed the door behind them and keyed it to internal lock. The sound was soft but final. The child sat where he indicated without hesitation. Their feet did not reach the floor. They tucked them back, heels pressing against the bench supports. The guard remained standing. He removed his glove from his pocket, the one retrieved from the frost, and placed it on the table. He did not slide it toward the child. He left it where it was, an object rather than an accusation. "You dropped this," he said. The child's eyes flicked to it, then away. They did not reach for it. He watched their hands instead. One sleeve was pulled down farther than the other. The fabric bunched unnaturally around the wrist. When the child shifted, the cuff slipped just enough to reveal the mark beneath, red, already deepening, shaped clearly by fingers. The guard did not react outwardly. He activated his recorder and lowered the sensitivity threshold. Miner located near North Service Gate following unauthorized override. Displays signs of distress. No visible injury beyond handling marks. He ended the entry. The child's gaze lifted briefly at the sound of his voice, then dropped again. They seemed to be listening not to what he said, but to how he said it. "Are you hurt?" The child shook her head. "Are you cold?" Another shake, smaller this time. He removed his outer gloves and set them beside the child on the bench, close enough to be seen but not offered. The child hesitated, then reached for one and pulled it into her sleeve, gripping it tight against her chest. The guard noted the choice. One glove, not both. He crouched slightly, lowering his height without fully kneeling. He did not crowd the space. "Did someone bring you to the gate?" he asked. The child nodded once. "Do you know why?" Silence. The guard waited. He had learned long ago that silence often carried more information than answers. The child's breathing slowed as the seconds passed, controlled, measured. When they finally spoke, the words were barely audible. "He said I needed to listen." The guard absorbed that without response. "Who said that?" he asked carefully. The child's fingers tightened around the glove, their shoulders lifted, then stilled. "I'm not supposed to say." The words were recited, not chosen. The guard straightened and moved to the door, positioning himself fully in front of it. He did not block the child's view, only the exit. The radio at his shoulder came alive. "Return the child to assigned supervision," command said. "This incident is to be logged as resolved." The guard did not answer immediately. He looked back at the child. The child did not look at him. Their gaze was fixed on the glove, knuckles pale where they pressed into the wool. "Negative. Request clarification on override and custody." There was a pause on the line, longer than before. When the response came, the tone had changed. "This is a reputational matter," command said. "You are to comply." The guard ended the channel. He remained where he was, between the child and the door, as footsteps began to sound faintly in the corridor beyond. The footsteps stopped outside the door. A single knock followed, not loud, not urgent, measured as if to remind rather than request. "Open the door," a voice said from the corridor. Senior, familiar, the kind of voice the palace trusted to be calm. The guard did not move. Inside the room, the child shifted slightly on the bench. The sound was small, fabric against stone, but it carried. The guard adjusted his stance, widening it just enough to block the door fully. "This is unnecessary," the voice continued. "The child is expected elsewhere." "Where?" the guard asked, keeping his tone even. A pause. "Under supervision." "Whose?" Silence again, shorter this time. The guard keyed his recorder without looking away from the door. "Command presence at archival room, requesting names and logged authority for transfer." The door handle turned, locked. "You are exceeding your remit. You are not trained for this." The guard glanced back once. The child had gone very still, back straight now, chin slightly lifted as if bracing. Their eyes were fixed on the door, not on him. "I am trained to secure," the guard replied. "I am doing so." The radio crackled, another channel opening, more ears now. "Return the child," command said again, sharper. "You are instructed to erase the preliminary report and reset the gate." The guard did not respond immediately. He moved one step to the side, careful not to startle, and reached down to the table. He slid the knitted glove closer to the child, just an inch, enough to be reachable without effort. The child took it instantly, pulling it into her sleeve again, clutching it as if it anchored them to the room. That was his answer. "Unable," the guard said into the radio. "Safeguarding concern remains unresolved." The corridor shifted. He could hear it, the subtle change in posture, the quiet repositioning of bodies unused to being denied. Authority rarely raised its voice here. It relied on compliance. "You will be held accountable for this," the senior voice said. "Yes," the guard replied. The word was not defiant. It was logistical.
Another voice joined the channel, unfamiliar, external, measured. Confirm minor present and secured. Confirmed, the guard said. No injury beyond restraint marks. Maintain position. Do not transfer custody. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Outside the door, someone exhaled sharply. Footsteps retreated a half step, then stopped again. The senior voice did not return. The guard adjusted his stance, settling in. He could feel the heat from the child now, faint through the layers of fabric and air. The room smelled of old paper and wool. Time passed, not marked by clocks, but by the slow easing of tension in the child's shoulders. They leaned back against the wall at last, still holding the glove, but less rigid now. The guard remained standing. He did not speak again. There was nothing more to say. Beyond the door, the palace recalibrated. Messages were sent, decisions deferred upward, records quietly duplicated before they could be altered. This was no longer about a gate, it was about custody, and for the moment the child remained where they were, unmoved, unheard by anyone who had tried to hurry them away. The guard stayed in place, between the child and the corridor, waiting for the next order that would test how far protocol could bend before it broke.
The order arrived in writing. Not a voice transmission, not a discussion. A formal directive routed through the internal command system, stamped with priority clearance and restricted distribution. The guard read it once on his wrist terminal, then again more slowly. Return the miner immediately. Reset the north service gate. All preliminary logs to be corrected to maintenance error. Further documentation is not required. The language was precise, polished, designed to close a problem without acknowledging it had ever existed. He did not acknowledge receipt. Outside the archival room, the corridor had gone quiet, too quiet. Earlier he had heard the subtle sounds of authority gathering, shoes repositioning, low voices, the faint rustle of coats. Now there was nothing. Silence like this usually meant decisions had already been made elsewhere. He remained in front of the door, weight evenly distributed, hands relaxed at his sides. The child sat on the bench behind him, still holding the glove. They had not moved since the external channel instructed him to maintain position. He checked the time. 05:47. Day staff would begin entering the palace within the hour. Once that happened, movement would increase and discretion would become more difficult. The order was timed. He understood that. The radio clicked. "You have received instructions," command said. The voice was different now, not irritated, controlled. "Confirm compliance." The guard did not respond immediately. He shifted his stance slightly, enough to glance back. The child's gaze met his for a brief moment, then dropped. Their breathing remained shallow but steady. No tears, no sound. He turned back to the door. "Request clarification," he said, "on what basis the override was authorized. That information is not relevant to your role. Then clarify custody authority." A pause. "Return the child." The guard keyed his recorder without breaking eyeline with the door. "Command reiterates order to transfer custody without providing authorization details. You are creating unnecessary exposure. This will reflect on your judgment." The guard had expected that. Judgment was always the lever, not legality, not safety. Judgment implied discretion, and discretion could be punished. "I am documenting an anomaly and safeguarding a minor." "You are not qualified to assess safeguarding risk," the voice snapped, irritation bleeding through now. "You are a gate officer." The words were chosen carefully. Reduction of scope, reduction of authority. The guard absorbed them without reaction. I am qualified to delay, pending verification. There was a longer silence this time. When command spoke again, the voice had cooled. You will open the door. No, the guard replied. The word landed cleanly, without emphasis. Behind him, the child shifted slightly. The guard did not turn, but he felt the movement, the quiet adjustment of weight. The child had not tried to leave. That mattered. Footsteps approached again from the corridor, more than before. He could hear the difference now. Multiple people, different weights. Someone cleared their throat, a habitual sound before speaking in rooms where they expected compliance. A knock sounded at the door, firmer than before. This is your final instruction, a senior voice said from the other side. Open the door and return the child. This matter will be handled appropriately. The guard rested one hand against the doorframe, feeling the cold of the metal through his glove. He pictured the open gate, the frost, the glove beneath the hinge, the silence that had surrounded it. Handled, he said. Yes. The guard looked down at his wrist terminal again. The written order still glowed on the screen, waiting for acknowledgement. If he refused, it would escalate automatically. Formal review, suspension pending investigation. He understood the sequence. He had lived inside it. He raised his eyes to the door. I am declining the order and retaining custody until external oversight assumes responsibility. The silence on the other side of the door was immediate and complete. No response, no denial, just the sound of someone taking a step back. The guard knew then that the next pressure would not come as words. The pressure came quietly, not as raised voices or forced entry, but as absence. The corridor outside the archival room emptied. Footsteps receded. Radios fell silent. Even the low mechanical hum of the ventilation system seemed to soften, as if the building itself were withdrawing attention. Isolation was deliberate. The guard remained where he was, posture unchanged. He had learned long ago that when authority retreated like this, it was preparing to reframe the situation rather than confront it directly. He checked his terminal again. A new notification had appeared beneath the standing order. Pending administrative review. Officer to remain at location until relieved. No instruction to open the door. No instruction to transfer the child. Just containment. He understood what that meant. They were buying time, waiting for someone else to arrive who could carry the decision without fingerprints. Behind him, the child shifted on the bench. The guard heard the small movement and turned his head slightly, enough to acknowledge without startling. You're staying here, he said quietly. No one comes in without me. The child nodded once. Their grip on the glove loosened just a little, fingers uncurling, then settling again. Minutes passed. The palace began to wake around them. Distant sounds filtered through the stone. Doors opening, muted conversations, the faint roll of carts on service corridors far removed from this one. Normal life resuming, carefully insulated from the anomaly being contained in a locked archival room. The guard's radio chirped once, a different tone. Confirm condition of the miner, an external voice said, measured. Stable, the guard replied. No escalation. Maintain position. The channel closed. He noted the phrasing, maintain position, not return, not release. Someone had intervened quietly. Another message followed on his terminal, this one marked confidential, review hold. His access privileges adjusted in real time, certain systems graying out, others remaining. He was being limited without being removed. He accepted that as a temporary victory. The door behind him remained sealed. No further knocks came. No more voices attempted persuasion. Authority had shifted strategy from command to observation. He remained standing, weight balanced, conserving energy. The cold had seeped deeper now, settling into his legs, but he did not adjust his stance. Any movement might be misread as readiness to comply. The child leaned back against the wall at last, the rigid tension in their shoulders eased by degrees so small they were almost imperceptible. They did not speak, they did not sleep, they simply existed in the space, unhurried for the first time that morning. The guard watched the door. He thought briefly of the gate, the green light still glowing, waiting to be reset, of the report he had refused to erase, of how easily all of this could have been smoothed over if he had followed the instruction as written. The cost of refusal was already accruing. He could feel it in the way the system had narrowed around him, in the careful language now used to describe his status. Administrative review, pending relief, containment. He would be suspended, that much was certain. What remained uncertain was whether the truth would reach the point where it could no longer be quietly buried. Another notification appeared. External Welfare Team en route. ETA, 18 minutes. The guard allowed himself a single controlled breath. He did not relax. He did not move aside. He remained between the child and the door, exactly where he had been since the first order arrived. When the relief finally came, it would not be ceremonial, it would be procedural, documented, irreversible. Until then, he held position. Orders had been given, and deliberately, carefully, he had refused them. The external welfare team arrived without ceremony. No announcement preceded them, no escort of senior staff. Two individuals appeared at the far end of the corridor, identification badges visible but unobtrusive, movements efficient and unhurried. They did not look toward the archival room at first. They walked past it deliberately, as if confirming surroundings before acknowledging its significance. The guard remained in position. When they returned, one of them nodded once, not to the guard, but to the sealed door. "Confirmed the minor is inside," the woman said quietly. "Confirmed," the guard replied. "Any immediate medical concerns?" "None observed." She made a note on a tablet, the faint tap of her stylus loud in the otherwise empty corridor. Her partner stood slightly back, scanning the hallway with practiced indifference. "We'll need access," she said. The guard did not step aside immediately. "Before that," he said, "custody transfer must be logged, with names." The woman looked at him for the first time then, really looked. Her expression did not change, but something in her posture shifted, a recognition of the situation rather than irritation with it. "That can be arranged," she said. She spoke into her comm unit, low and precise. Names were exchanged, clearances verified, the system confirmed. Only then did the guard disengage the lock. The door opened inward. Warm air escaped into the corridor. The child looked up from the bench but did not stand. Their eyes went first to the guard, not to the new arrivals. He stepped inside briefly and crouched again, keeping his voice low. "They're here to help," he said. "I'll stay right here." The child nodded, fingers tightening once around the glove, then loosening again. The welfare officer approached slowly, kneeling to bring herself to eye level. She did not reach out. She did not speak at first. She waited. The guard stepped back, positioning himself just inside the doorway, close enough to intervene, far enough to allow the transfer to begin. Behind him, the corridor shifted again. New footsteps approached, sharper, more purposeful, authority returning, but altered now, aware it was being observed. A senior official appeared at the far end of the hall, coat immaculate, expression composed. They stopped when they saw the welfare team. "This won't be necessary," the official said. The woman did not look up from the child. "It already is." The official turned to the guard. "You've made your point." The guard met their gaze. "No," he said, "I documented it." The official's eyes narrowed slightly. "You broke protocol." "Yes." The admission was simple, unadorned. The guard knew that word "broke" would follow him. It would appear in reports, in hearings, in quiet conversations about judgment and reliability. He accepted it. The welfare officer stood then, the child beside her. "We're ready." The guard stepped aside fully for the first time since the gate incident, allowing them to pass. The child moved with them, glancing back once. The guard did not follow. He remained in the corridor as the group disappeared around the corner, escorted now by systems and oversight beyond palace control. The senior official lingered. "You understand what this means," they said. The guard nodded. "Yes." "You'll be suspended pending inquiry." "Yes." The official hesitated, then turned away without another word. The corridor emptied again. The guard stood alone. The archival room door opened behind him. The bench inside, now vacant. The rule had been broken, and there would be no reversing that. The suspension was delivered digitally. No escort arrived to remove him. No public acknowledgement followed. His access privileges shifted in quiet increments. First the command channel, then internal security feeds, then the layered systems that had defined his daily awareness of the palace. Each loss was subtle, cumulative, designed to feel procedural rather than punitive. He acknowledged the notice without comment. By mid-morning he had been reassigned to a holding status, not dismissed, not charged, contained. The guard remained in the corridor long after the welfare team had gone, standing where he had been, as if movement might suggest uncertainty. The open archival room behind him smelled faintly of wool and old paper. The bench was empty, the table bare. A junior officer eventually approached, posture careful. "Sir," the officer said quietly, "you're instructed to report to administrative review." The guard nodded and followed without protest. They walked through service corridors he had patrolled for years, now seeing them stripped of operational context. Cameras he once monitored were now opaque to him. Doors still opened at his approach, but with delays measured in seconds rather than instant recognition. The review room was small, functional, a single table, 2 chairs. A wall-mounted display showing his personnel file, frozen on a neutral summary of service years and commendations. No one sat across from him yet. He stood instead of taking the chair. Time passed. Eventually a panel convened, not in person, but through staggered connections. Faces appeared on the display, some familiar, others deliberately neutral. The language was precise, carefully chosen. "You acted outside direct instruction." "Yes." "You delayed corrective action at a secured gate." "Yes." "You initiated external involvement without authorization." "Yes." "No justifications were requested, none were offered." "Your actions created reputational exposure." The guard did not respond. However, one voice continued, the miner has been transferred to independent custody. The guard's posture did not change, but something in his breathing eased, just slightly. You are suspended pending full inquiry, the panel concluded, effective immediately. The display went dark. The guard was escorted, not out of the palace, but to a neutral holding area reserved for personnel under review. No handcuffs, no ceremony, just distance. He surrendered his remaining credentials and was released from the building through a side exit rarely used for departures. Outside, the morning had fully arrived. Frost melted into shallow streams along the stone path. The north service gate stood closed now, sealed properly, its indicator light dormant. He paused once, looking back at the structure of the palace rising above him. It appeared unchanged, imposing, orderly. Only he knew how narrowly that order had held. Days passed. The inquiry moved slowly, as such things did. Logs were reviewed, overrides examined, testimony carefully gathered, stripped of tone and urgency. The senior official involved declined comment pending counsel. The guard was not contacted again during that period. On the 5th day, a message arrived. External findings pending, miner to remain in independent protection. He read it twice. That was enough. He folded the device, set it aside, and sat back. The outcome for himself remained uncertain. His career, his standing, the years of service he had given, all were now subject to quiet deliberation. But the child was no longer alone in a corridor before dawn. The glove would not be needed again. And whatever followed for him, the broken rule had held long enough to matter.
The inquiry did not begin with questions. It began with access. 3 days into suspension, the guard received a limited credentials packet. Read-only clearance, supervised terminal use, time restricted. It was framed as cooperation. In practice, it was containment with structure. He reported to the review annex at 07:30, earlier than required. The building sat apart from the main palace complex, utilitarian and unadorned, its windows narrow and deliberately opaque. Inside, the air was cooler than necessary, the lighting flat and unforgiving. An analyst met him at the terminal bay, civilian, mid-career, careful posture. "You'll have 30 minutes per session," she said. "All activity is logged." He nodded and took the seat. The terminal recognized him after a delay, not rejection, hesitation, systems recalibrating trust. He opened the gate access records first, North Service Gate, the morning of the incident. The override key was already flagged, its metadata expanded for review. He scanned it slowly. Override authorization level, discretionary. Origin terminal, mobile. Authentication, valid. Justification field, blank. Blank justifications were rare but permitted for senior officials. They were meant for emergencies where speed outweighed documentation. This had not been an emergency. He widened the time window. The same override key appeared again 2 weeks earlier, same gate, same hour, no justification. Then again, 3 days after that, different gate, same pattern. He did not rush. He marked each instance carefully, building a timeline rather than a case. The palace systems rewarded patience. Anything flagged too aggressively invited correction. He cross-referenced camera downtimes. Each override aligned with a blind window, not full outages, micro gaps, 2 minutes, 90 seconds, enough to move someone from one controlled space to another without record. He felt the familiar tightening in his chest, not anger, recognition. This was not opportunistic misuse, it was practiced. He checked movement logs tied to the child's schedule, lesson transitions, early dismissals, escort reassignments marked as instructional adjustment. The phrasing repeated, always signed off by the same authority. No single entry was alarming. Together, they formed a shape. The analyst cleared her throat softly. "You're nearing the end of your session." He nodded and saved his work to the shared review folder. He did not annotate, he did not comment. He let the data stand as it was. As he rose, she hesitated. "You should know," she said, keeping her voice low. "Someone higher up is pushing for resolution." "Resolution," he repeated. "Yes, a clean one." He thanked her and left. Outside, the afternoon light had shifted, casting long shadows across the annex courtyard. He stood for a moment, absorbing the warmth, then checked his device. A new message had arrived while he was inside. Request for clarification. Override authority disputes logged irregularities. Meeting scheduled. Attendance required. No sender name, no location specified yet. He understood the implication. Someone had noticed the pattern too, or had realized that he might. Either way, the next conversation would not be about logs. It would be about why he had kept looking. The meeting took place in a room without windows. It was not an interrogation space. No recording equipment was visible beyond the standard terminal embedded in the table. The walls were paneled in neutral composite, sound dampened, designed to make time difficult to judge. The lighting was steady, neither warm nor cold. Two people were already seated when the guard entered. One he recognized by role rather than name, a senior administrative officer whose authority sat between ceremonial command and operational control. The other was unfamiliar, introduced only as oversight liaison. "Sit," the senior officer said. The guard complied. "You've been reviewing access logs," the officer continued, tone conversational. "Looking for patterns." "Yes." "You were not instructed to do so." "I was granted access." "That access was for clarification, not investigation." The guard said nothing. The liaison leaned forward slightly. "You understand how this appears." "I understand what the logs show." A pause followed, not hostile, measuring. The senior officer tapped the table once. "You're building an imputation where none has been formally established. I'm identifying repeated anomalies tied to the same override authority, which you do not have the standing to interpret." The guard folded his hands loosely on the table. "I'm not interpreting intent, I'm documenting frequency." The liaison exchanged a glance with the officer. "Frequency can be coincidental," the liaison said. "Senior officials operate with discretion." "Yes, and discretion leaves patterns." Silence settled again. The room's ventilation system cycled softly, a low hum that filled the gap where raised voices might have gone in a different setting. The senior officer spoke next. "The child has been removed from palace custody. Independent oversight is in place. The immediate risk has been mitigated." "That addresses outcome, not method." "You are fixated on method. That fixation is what concerns us." The guard lifted his eyes. "The method allowed it to happen more than once." The liaison closed the folder in front of them. "Your suspension remains in effect." "I expected that." "You will not be reinstated until this inquiry concludes." "I expected that, too." The officer studied him for a long moment. "You could help this conclude faster." The guard did not respond.
Your initial intervention forced an external review. That review will satisfy safeguarding requirements. Further escalation serves no operational purpose. The implication was clear. Stop digging. Let the process finish itself. I documented what I saw. I reviewed what I was permitted to review. And now? And now the records speak for themselves. The liaison leaned back. You're aware that challenging a discretionary override at this level has consequences beyond your career. Yes, personal ones. He considered that. I was aware when I stepped between the child and the gate. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, the senior officer nodded once. You may go. The guard stood and left the room without another word. Outside, the light had changed again. Late afternoon now. The air carried the faint warmth of stone, releasing heat it had held all day. He walked slowly across the courtyard, aware of eyes on him, without seeing them. That evening, another message arrived. Override authority temporarily suspended pending audit. No explanation, no attribution. He read it twice. The pattern had been acknowledged, even if no one would say so aloud. The guard set the device down and sat back. The inquiry would continue. Statements would be shaped, conclusions softened, responsibility redistributed until it no longer pointed cleanly in any one direction. But the overrides would stop. The blind gaps would close, and somewhere away from the palace a child would sleep without being moved before dawn. For now, that was enough.
The summons came at dusk. Not formal, not written, a location and a time delivered through a neutral channel that no longer recognized him as active duty, but still expected compliance. The guard read it once and prepared without haste. North Service Gate, 1940. He arrived early. The light was fading fast, the sky settling into a flat grey that blurred edges and softened distance. Cold crept back into the stone, drawn up from the ground as the day released what warmth it had held. The gate stood closed now, fully sealed, indicator dark, no green glow, no ambiguity. He positioned himself where he had always stood, just inside the perimeter line, posture relaxed, hands visible. He was no longer on duty, but habit placed him correctly all the same. Footsteps approached from the inner path, unhurried, singular. The senior official emerged from the corridor, coat buttoned, expression composed. No escort, no witnesses. That alone signaled intent. This was not meant for record. You chose the gate, the official said, stopping a few paces away. It was specified, the guard replied. The official studied him in silence, eyes flicking briefly to the control panel, the hinge, the ground where Frost had once held a child's glove. The official had noticed, or remembered. You've caused disruption, the official said, finally. I documented anomalies. You escalated beyond your remit. I delayed closure, the guard corrected. I secured a minor. The official's mouth tightened slightly. You forced external oversight. Yes, that was unnecessary. The guard said nothing. The wind moved through the hedges, a low rustling sound that filled the space between them. The palace loomed behind, lights beginning to glow in upper windows as evening routines resumed. You understand that discretionary authority exists to manage sensitive matters. Yes. And that not every correction is abuse. Yes. The official stepped closer, not aggressively, deliberately. The distance closed to conversational proximity. Then explain, the official said, why you felt entitled to intervene. The guard did not answer immediately.
He looked at the gate instead, at the seam where metal met stone, at how clean it looked now that systems had been corrected. "The child asked me to stop," the guard said. The official's eyes narrowed. "Children resist discipline." "Sometimes," the guard replied. "And sometimes," the official said, "they must be taught compliance." The guard turned back then, met the official's gaze squarely. Not by isolating them in blind zones, not by removing records. The air shifted, the calm fractured just slightly. The official's voice hardened. "You are making allegations. I am stating procedures." Repeated. The official straightened. "You have no proof of intent." "No," I agreed, "only pattern." The official looked past him briefly, as if confirming they were still alone, then back again. "You blocked me at this gate." "Yes." "You placed yourself between authority and custody." "Yes." The official's jaw tightened. "You don't understand the scale of what you interfered with." The guard remained still. "I understand what I interrupted." Silence fell again, heavier this time, the kind that preceded a decision. The official took one step closer, close enough now that the guard could smell the faint scent of wool and cold air on the coat. "I am here to reclaim what was taken out of my control," the official said. The guard did not move. "You are no longer in uniform. You have no standing." The guard shifted his weight forward, placing himself squarely between the official and the gate, mirroring the position he had taken days earlier without thinking. "I still have duty," the guard said. The official's eyes dropped to his stance, then lifted again. "Move," the official said. The guard did not. The gate remained closed behind him, and for a moment neither of them spoke, as the question of who would yield settled heavily into the space between stone and steel.
The official waited. It was not impatience, it was expectation, the assumption that time, position, and consequence would do their work without further effort. The palace had always operated that way. Pressure applied slowly, invisibly, until resistance tired itself out. The guard did not step aside. The wind shifted again, colder now, drawing down from the upper terraces. The hedges rustled, then settled. Somewhere deeper in the complex, a door closed with a hollow sound. "You are suspended," the official said at last. "Any further interference will be recorded as insubordination." "Yes," the guard replied. "You will not be protected," the official continued. "Not by command, not by review. You will be isolated." The guard remained where he was, stance unchanged. The stone beneath his boots was colder than before, the chill rising steadily through the soles. He did not adjust. "I was isolated at the gate," he said. "So was the child." The official's expression tightened, irritation flickering through composure. "You keep returning to that." "Yes." "You don't see the full picture." "I saw enough." The official took a breath, slow and controlled. "This ends now." The guard shook his head once, small, final. Behind him, the gate controls remained dark. The override authority that had once forced the mechanism open no longer responded. The audit had done its work. The system now required layered confirmation the official no longer possessed. The official noticed. Their eyes flicked to the panel, then back. "You think this is about access. It's not." "No, it's about custody." The official's voice dropped. "That child will forget this." "Maybe, but the pattern won't." Silence stretched again. This time it carried weight. Footsteps sounded faintly at the far end of the service path,
not approaching quickly, not retreating. Someone had stopped just out of sight, waiting. Witness or backup, the guard could not tell. Either way, the space was no longer private. The official glanced toward the sound, then back. The calculation shifted. "This conversation is over," the official said. "Yes." The official stepped back, smoothing the front of their coat, reclaiming the appearance of authority. "You've chosen your position." The guard did not answer. There was nothing left to clarify. The official turned and walked away, footsteps measured, unhurried, disappearing into the corridor that led back toward the inner palace. The sound faded, absorbed by stone and distance. The guard remained at the gate for several minutes after, long enough to ensure the encounter would not be reframed as acquiescence. Only then did he step aside. The gate stayed closed. Later that night, a message arrived through the same neutral channel that had summoned him. External inquiry elevated. Senior official placed on administrative leave pending findings. No details, no attribution. He read it once and locked the device. The next message followed an hour later. Your suspension remains in effect. No contact with palace systems until further notice. He accepted that too. In the days that followed, the official did not reappear. Their name was removed quietly from internal directories. Overrides once tied to their authority returned errors when accessed, then disappeared altogether. The guard was not called back to duty. He did not expect to be. What mattered had already moved beyond him, into records that could no longer be edited cleanly, into oversight that would not answer to palace custom, into a custody arrangement that no longer relied on discretion. Weeks later, from a distance, he saw the child once more, not at a gate, not in a corridor, in an open courtyard under supervision that did not crowd or grip. The child walked freely, hands empty, shoulders loose, moving without being steered. The guard did not approach. He stood where he was, watching until the moment passed. Then he turned away. The gate behind him remained sealed, silent, and for the first time in years, unquestioned.
The formal notice arrived 2 weeks later. It was delivered through external counsel, not palace channels, and written in language stripped of ceremony. The inquiry had reached its preliminary conclusion. Certain findings would remain sealed, others would be referred onward. The distinctions were deliberate, crafted to satisfy oversight without inviting public scrutiny. The guard read the document once, then again more slowly. The senior official had been removed from duty pending further action, their discretionary authority revoked indefinitely. No admission of wrongdoing was recorded, no denial either. Administrative language replaced moral judgment. The child's custody had been reassigned. Independent protection, external supervision, no unscheduled movement, no discretionary overrides. The guard felt the weight of that line more than any other. He folded the notice and set it aside. Outside, late afternoon light filtered through bare branches, casting thin shadows across the pavement. The air was mild for the season, the cold having retreated just enough to remind him that time had passed. His suspension was confirmed, indefinite, not punitive, the notice said, procedural. His actions had compromised internal confidence. Review would determine suitability for future service. He did not contest it. The following days were quiet, too quiet for someone accustomed to constant movement and layered awareness. Without the rhythm of patrols and system checks, time expanded, unstructured. He filled it carefully, morning runs, controlled routines, habits that kept his body from forgetting its purpose. He was not contacted by command again. Then, one evening, a message arrived from an unfamiliar address. External Welfare Review requests supplemental testimony. Voluntary. He accepted. The meeting took place in a municipal building far from the palace grounds. Glass and steel instead of stone. Open corridors instead of controlled passages. The difference unsettled him more than he expected. The interviewer was thorough but restrained. Questions focused on sequence, not interpretation. Timing, location, actions taken, actions refused. "Did you consider the consequences of declining the order?" she asked. "Yes." "Why proceed anyway?" He paused, choosing his words with care. "Because delay would have returned the child to a situation that had already gone unlogged." She nodded, making a note. No reaction beyond that. At the end, she closed her folder. "You're aware this may conclude without public acknowledgement?" "Yes." "And without reinstatement?" "Yes." She studied him for a moment. "You'd do it again?" He did not answer immediately. Outside, traffic moved steadily. Pedestrians passed without noticing him. Ordinary life, unmarked by gates or overrides. "Yes," he said. The interviewer nodded once. "That's all." Weeks passed. The palace issued a brief internal notice. Restructuring of oversight procedures, revised access controls, additional safeguards around minor movement. No names were mentioned. The guard read it online, the language familiar in its careful avoidance. He closed the page and sat back. Late one afternoon, walking near a public garden adjacent to a secured residence, he saw the child again. They were with two attendants he did not recognize, dressed casually, moving at the child's pace rather than directing it. The child paused near a low wall, watching pigeons scatter and regroup. There was laughter, brief, unguarded. The guard stopped at a distance. The child did not see him. That was intentional. He remained still until they moved on, then continued his walk in the opposite direction. That night, another message arrived. Suspension upheld. Service concluded. No ceremony. No appeal offered. He read it once. Then he deleted it. The cost had been exacted, but custody had shifted, and that, he knew, was the only measure that mattered. Life after service did not arrive all at once. It settled in gradually, through absence. The guard noticed it first in the mornings. No briefing schedule, no system alerts to review overnight. The habitual check of time still happened, but it no longer carried consequence. He woke early anyway. Training did not release its hold easily. He maintained routine where he could, physical conditioning, reading, controlled silence. It was important not to drift. Men who drifted tended to replay moments until they distorted. He did not want distortion. He wanted clarity. The inquiry closed quietly a month later. There was no announcement, no summary distributed beyond a narrow circle. The outcome existed only in revised procedures and the absence of a name from organizational charts. Internally, the palace adjusted. Externally, nothing appeared to have changed. That was by design. He received one final communication from external oversight, a courtesy notice, not a requirement. Safeguarding measures implemented, independent custody ongoing, no further action required. He read it once and archived it.
In the weeks that followed, he was contacted by no one from command, not even the junior officers who had once shared patrol rotations with him. Silence, he understood, was part of containment. Association created questions. Questions created discomfort. He did not resent it. One afternoon, while waiting at a pedestrian crossing near the civic quarter, he noticed a familiar pattern before he recognized the subject. A child, walking without being pulled forward. The spacing was wrong for palace movement, too loose, too human. He turned slightly. The child was there, several meters away, accompanied by two adults whose posture marked them as protective without being possessive. They did not grip, they did not crowd. They walked slightly behind, eyes scanning without directing. The child stopped suddenly to look at something on the ground. Neither adult corrected the pause. They waited. The guard watched from where he stood. He did not approach. He did not signal recognition. The child laughed once, briefly, then straightened and continued on. No gloves, no tension in the shoulders, no one steering their steps. When the light changed, the guard crossed in the opposite direction. He did not look back. That evening he sat at his kitchen table long after dark, the city quiet beyond the windows. He thought of the gate, not as it had been that morning, open and glowing green, but as it was now, sealed, logged, accountable. He thought of the choice to delay closure, of how small it had seemed at the time, how technical, how easily explained away. He understood now that systems failed most often not through force, but through compliance, through the quiet willingness to reset and move on. He had not moved on. There were consequences for that. He felt them daily. The absence of uniform, the absence of role, the knowledge that he would not stand watch again. But there were also outcomes. A child no longer moved before dawn. Records that could not be erased cleanly. An authority that no longer operated without witness. Those were not rewards. They were corrections. He cleared the table, washed his cup, and turned off the light. Tomorrow would arrive without instruction. He would meet it as he had met everything since the gate, with attention. The palace would continue without him. That was inevitable. But somewhere within its walls, the rules bent just enough that morning to let custody shift, and that, he knew, was the point at which duty had been fulfilled.